to be talking more about the new growth agenda. And I'll introduce each of the panelists, and each of them will give a kind of opening short statement, and then we'll throw it all open to you. So, Walt, first of all. So you're Vice Chairman of MasterCard, and have also been the President of MasterCard Centre for Financial Inclusion. Tell us about MasterCard and why you should want to do anything that seems so philanthropic.
Okay. Just a couple minutes?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Well, at MasterCard, we've been struggling with all of the topics that came up this morning. We agree with President Calderon that companies should do well and do good at the same time. We don't think that's mutually exclusive. We think it's the same thing. So we've been experimenting. We're guided. I mean, our motivation is that we don't think business can succeed in a failing world, and we've shifted our orientation from philanthropy to using our business assets. So that's the key shift. So we used to think that to do good, a company had to do philanthropic things that were completely unrelated to their business. The reason we would do that would be that we couldn't be accused of feathering our own nest. But we've changed our mind on that. We think that's just a waste of time because it's not sustainable. So what we're guided by is sustainability. If MasterCard chooses clean water or AIDS or any of the many issues in the world, all we can do is give money. So instead, we did a recalculation. We decided, well, what we have to do is apply our knowledge, apply our assets to making a positive change in the world. And so a couple of quick examples. With philanthropy itself, when we did our IPO in 2006. We took 10% of the float, 10% of the stock, and we gave it to a foundation. We created the MasterCard Foundation. So at the time, it was pretty generous. We gave them $500 million, and we gave them completely separate governance. That was a good start, but because they own our stock, as we progress, as we do better, they do better. So they started with $500 million. Our market cap at the time was $5 billion. Now we're worth $100 billion. So they have $10 billion of our stock. It's sustainable. It's as long as we grow, they grow. We thought that was a great model. It's disappointing it wasn't emulated by others who came after us. But we think that kind of approach is the right approach. And then a couple of quick examples. We're using a trading mentality. We figure out what we've got, how we can trade and have a positive social impact. A couple of quick examples. We realize we are rich with data. We have extraordinary data. Last year was about 50 billion transactions. We can see buyers and sellers transacting around the world. We did a trade with Harvard. We gave a great economist at Harvard, Ricardo Hausman, a piece of our data. Our data is anonymous and scrubbed, so it's not a risk. We gave him the data. He's giving us insights, economic insights on how to grow economies on a community level. That's an example. Another one would be the Gates Foundation. Gates Foundation is the biggest foundation. They've got about, I think, $40 billion, so they have lots of money. They gave us money. So the Gates Foundation gave a for-profit company, MasterCard, money, and we set up a lab, an incubator lab in Nairobi. So we're working on financial inclusion. By the way, that's the theme that we set, financial inclusion, getting people the basic access to financial services. That's the theme we chose because it's related to our business. So in that case, Gates gave us money, we gave expertise, we set up the lab. So those are the types of things we're doing. There's a lot of test and learn, but we think we have the model right. There's just an enormous amount of work we can do, leveraging our people, our technology, products, our data, et
etc. I'll stop there.
Okay, and so when we talked about this before, and I'm very interested in this model for collaboration. So instead of saying we can only give money, say what have we actually got that we can trade? And I think that's something we hopefully will come back to. When we were talking about it earlier, Walt and I, we said it was a little bit like trading baseball cards. You got this, I've got that, let's see how we can do it. And I hadn't realized that Walt was Canadian, and in fact he's more interested in trading ice hockey cards, which is apparently called hockey in Canada.
Yeah, you
right?
don't need the
But an interesting model. Do you need it? Have you got it? How do you do that? So let's come back to that on collaboration. Hans-Ole next. Hans-Ole Jochumsen, who is the president of NASDAQ. We're really happy to have you here. So when we think about the capital markets and the role they can play in defining this new growth agenda, what would you like to say about that?
First, I'd like to say that I definitely like the phrase reinvent growth. I think it's spot on. But I would like to start with saying a little bit about the challenge, because I think that the challenge is in reality a little bit bigger, because we are still trying to cope with some of the political decisions after the financial crisis. So I mean, and I don't want to go into discussing whether it was right or wrong. I don't think that's valuable in any way, but I think it's relevant to at least face the facts. So for me, facts is that the global regulator for banks, the Basel Committee, are implementing new rules for banks. And I think sometimes it's underestimated what will be the consequences of this. Because in all simplicity, it means that money will be more costly. And what happens if money are being more costly? It means that it will be more expensive to borrow money. It also means that there will be less money to borrow to the one who needs to lend. So what do you think will be the consequence of that? So if banks are not able to lend out as much money as they could before, if money are going to be more expensive, then bankers will react in the way that they will try to make sure that they can lend money out to the one who are the most safe, because they don't want to lose money again, because they've been punished for losing too much. So who's then going to be the one who lose out in this game? So let me come with a conclusion. The conclusion is that the one who will lose out is all the ones who are investing, taking risks, and create jobs. And I know I stress it a little bit, but that's just to make sure that I get the point out here. So the problem will be, or is a little bit, that the one who are creating jobs in the world are not necessarily the largest companies of the world. A lot of studies are showing that growth are created by small companies, companies who grow, people who have a new idea, who need to get it financed, to get it to fly. They create jobs. And who will not be able to borrow money? Entrepreneurs with good ideas. Because it's extremely risky. And if a bank have X they can borrow out, they will of course start to borrow to the ones where they don't lose money. That's what we have learned in the last 10 years. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands this, because it is a challenge. And by the way, this challenge is not something we have seen fully yet, because these capital requirements are still being rolled out. So you have just seen the beginning of it. Capital requirements for banks are going to increase the next couple of years too. So I guess that was not a very optimistic way to start. But coming a little bit back to sustainability and talking a little bit about NASDAQ, I think a couple of angles into this I would like to cover. One of them is that on the more specific sustainability agenda, we have been active as being included in the United Nations Global Compact Program. We also have been instrumental in creating what is called the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative. We, by the way, our Nasdaq exchange in Helsinki are the first exchange in the world getting the WWF Green Office Diploma. So we even do something in that way. And let me stay a little bit with Helsinki, because that's some of the things we can push a little bit to. 66% of all listed companies listed in our exchange in Helsinki, they are reporting their carbon footprint. So I think step one to talk about this with carbon is a little bit to calculate and find out how much do you really produce and be transparent about it. So that is one of the agendas we are able to push, and I think Helsinki is a very good example. The other way into this from a Nasdaq perspective is, of course, to see, okay, but how are we able to support an agenda where we have more sustainable growth? And let me mention a couple of areas. For example, we have the carbon area again. So Nasdaq are trading and clearing in Europe, European Union's relevant products called the EUAs. Also the certified emission reduction certificates are traded and cleared by us. So in reality, depending on what you think about the program, but the program is there. And at least by trading and clearing it, it means that we try to support that this certificate program can be workable. We also very lately have created a new renewable index for wind in Germany. And then someone say, okay, why that? But I guess many of you know that Germany have taken some very tough decisions after what happened in Japan a couple of years ago, and are really driving to a direction where they will be much more dependent on renewable energy. One of these areas are wind. The challenge with wind is a little bit that you need to find out how to store it, but meanwhile, we need to find out how to get a good pricing mechanism about the wind you produce. So we have created this index which went live in September this year, and beginning of next year we are ready to take the next step, which means that we are going to create a financial product called a future. And why do I mention it? I mention it because this product will create an opportunity for the companies who are in this sector, whether they are producers or users of energy. They will have a need to hedge, and especially when we talk about wind. So in reality, we are trying to create a new product, financial products, which are able to support the development and the use of wind energy. And hopefully that's only a step ahead. Another area is indices. We are producing worldwide more than 40,000 indices, but why I want to stress a few of them and put it into a context here. We have a Nasdaq Green Economical Global Benchmark Index. So in reality, everybody who wants to invest, they will have an opportunity to try to find a provider. It can be their pension provider. It can be somebody who running a fund. It can be ETFs and ETPs and all these fancy products nowadays. But in reality, something which are tracking companies who are in the sector. We also have indices for solar, for water, and for wind, for companies in these sectors. So you are able to invest there. So I think one of the advices for me would be, it would be very good if guys like the ones in this room try to push this agenda. Because unfortunately, most of the world's assets are being invested in indices which have, no footprint of any kind. It's just the biggest companies of the world. So I think until somebody starts to act, meaning that they invest in companies who make a difference, I think a lot of what we discussed today is very difficult, because the amount of money being in these pension funds, institutional investors, foundations are so big. So as long as they don't act, we have a challenge. So let me just end up with a small personal note, because I think in reality, and I think also the president said it very clearly, it is a question about acting. We need to act. And in reality, I think all of us, everybody need to act. It's not enough to say that somebody else needs to act. So on that personal note, I just want to say that the last couple of years I have produced 12,000 kilowatt hours of electricity on the roof of my house in Italy. So I've done a little bit.
Thanks very much, Hans-Ole. How did you generate? What was it? Is it
solar panels?
Solar. You have more sun in Italy than we get in London, sadly. But anyway, thanks very much for that. And finally, Lois Quam, who, I mean, you've spanned all three of these different sectors that we're trying to bring together. You've worked in policy, you've worked in business, and you're now Chief Operating Officer of the Nature Conservancy. So what can you tell us about those boundaries?
Well, thank you. And I'm very struck, Mr. President, by the statement you made that the recipes aren't working, the old recipes aren't working, and the way that you define the scale of the problem. And I think it's important to be clear that in many areas, like climate and the environment, events are overtaking us. And I believe that the principal purpose of partnerships right now is to increase the urgency by which we act, to make us to be able to act more urgently. And I've seen how different sectors look at urgency. I used to run half of United Health Group, and we're a publicly listed company. Quarterly earnings drove us. And at times that can lead to too short-term a focus, but in other instances, quarterly earnings can lead to a tremendous focus on what you need to do then and there to get at your problems. In government, governments move at a different pace, very much for the long term. When I worked with Secretary Clinton at the State Department, though, we really increased the urgency of some of the things we are working on. We set high goals, we measured progress to those goals in a steady way. In one area, we set a goal of decreasing the number of women who die giving birth by 50% in a year. And we put together an effort amongst our teams in Uganda and Zambia to do that. And we nearly got there. The initial plan the team gave me when I asked them how much we could reduce maternal death in a year was 8%. And I said, well, let's try for 50%. And in the end, I asked the team, what was it, how were we able to get there? And it was a stretch goal, a disruptive goal, a set of urgency around a situation, around a time frame, required our teams to work in very different ways. And at the Nature Conservancy, we're the largest environmental NGO in the United States. We work in 35 countries. It's the science and our partnerships that drive us to urgency. As the President mentioned, the science around climate change is so clear. And when we work on the ground with partners in doing specific projects around climate mitigation, around the protection of land and water, it is their experience that pulls us forward. So how can partnerships increase urgency? They can take us out of our comfort zone, out of our own narrow interests, and they can offer us the opportunity to learn from the approaches of others. Now, we've all been a part of partnerships that sort of do the opposite, that they get focused on information sharing or making sure things always stay equal or trying to build trust through process. And that's, I think, where leadership comes in, and what this meeting is about is, leadership's about fighting for something that's bigger than ourselves. Leadership, to use Oswald's point, is about building trust by doing. And the moment for this is now. Events are overtaking us, but they don't have to overtake us. We can, through working together in more effective ways, find the new recipes to move forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lewis. And I just want to ask a couple of quick questions, if I may, and to you, President Calderon. That's actually a view of partnerships that I haven't thought of before or encountered, and we've already established that I can be pretty impatient. Do you think partnerships can actually help? Do they drag you back, or can they actually help move forward more quickly?
Well, it is clear to me that a lot of efforts are required. And for instance, talking about financial sector, one of the problems we have in order to put the world on the right track is the lack of financial mechanism to do the right things. But at the same time, you can see an incredible potential in that because there are real businesses there. And so maybe we need to get together all those financial actors and partners, for instance, in the financial sector, and design the right mechanism because it's very profitable business. Actually, for instance, 2 years in a row, the new power generation plants have been the vast majority in renewables. More than 50% of the new investment in power generation have been renewable. A lot of these investments are long-term investment, and the payoff, the net present value, is completely positive. But financial sector are still afraid, or they don't know the capabilities of that. So we can work together in order to foster and put in the field the right mechanism and tools to do that. I'm talking, for instance, about stock markets. There is one thing I want to say. Doing this issue, going into low carbon economy, doesn't imply to sacrifice revenues or profit for company. Actually, if you see the Fortune 100 companies, 53 out of 100 have reported in 2013 savings altogether of more than $1.1 billion in one single year. Savings of more than $1 billion coming from renewable energy, saving energy mechanism, energy efficiency, and all. And I don't know the name of the index. Probably is sustainable energy index or sustainable index. But in that index, the company committed with green economy have had better profits and better performance than the rest of the index.
Yeah.
So it doesn't imply to sacrifice your businesses or your profits. Actually, the other way around, because these measures, as I say, improve your own competitiveness and productivity. So coming back to your question, it is possible to take wisdom coming from financial sector, from stock market, from governments, from private sector, from academy, put all those things together, put the things on track.
Well, if that's the case, and there have been increasing evidence reports so on saying that you do well by doing good, why are we so convinced that acting, or why are so many people so convinced that acting on climate change is bad for business?
Well, we can make some kind of opinion poll, but there are several options. One is maybe people don't know. So a lot of businessmen are thinking the old way. And because they jumped into business maybe when the things were completely different. Let me put my own example. I was Secretary of Energy in Mexico, roughly like 11 years ago, before being president. Now, the solar panels are 90% cheaper. 90% cheaper. I'm very sure that a lot of businessmen in Mexico just ignore that. No? Smart people like this guy and myself put solar cells in the roof. I did myself the way. Actually, I'm controlling with my iPhone. So I have so you cannot see, but anyway, I will. So Christine, you can see I'm generating right now. Yesterday, I generated 11 kilowatts hour in my roof. And I will follow your track because Mexico is much more sunny. But the point is, we need to widespread this incredible news, good news. Now, solar energy, wind energy, is as much as competitive as traditional fossil fuels in several countries, even here in the United States. Utility generating energy with solar cells won a contract in Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas, selling electricity in a cheaper way than fossil fuels companies in Texas. And in Chile, for instance, of course, it's much cheaper. Minery, so mining people is not exactly angels, to say it, or very environmental friendly, but we are building like, I don't know, maybe by large, the biggest solar facility in the world for business, not for generous souls or something like that. So maybe one is ignorance. Second, interest, because we know there is this issue very difficult to address, which is what is going to happen with the assets coming from, for instance, coal assets. If we say that 70% of the air pollution coming from energy power generation is coming from coal, and we recommend to phase out powering by coal, of course, coal assets are endangered, are the so-called the stranded assets in the future. They need to keep the coal in the soil. So, of course, companies are probably blocking. I don't remember, I was too young for that, but I know that here in the 50s and the 60s, with this battle about tobacco, no? There were a lot of advertising. Probably you have seen this Mad Men broadcast series, but a lot of advertising with doctors and nurses, very beautiful, all of them, saying, oh, it is not demonstrated that tobacco provokes cancer. So just smoke, and that's it. No? A lot of people die for that. Now we have this struggle saying, well, climate change is like a crazy story about a girl like this and men like that. It's not true. Climate change is not happening. It's not related with human activity. Forget about that. So I think it's investor interest. And other is we need to work together. And finally, and our point is, if we don't design an economic solution, even with the best willness, no one government will say, well, I will sacrifice economic growth for my people in order to save the planet. No one will do that. So we need to provide economic solution. And that's I would say, the benefit of this report.
So I'll come to you in a moment, but well, it's just that resonates very strongly with what you were saying about it's not just let's be generous and give a bit of money on the side, but let's actually work according to our own assets and our own interests. And do you agree that it's now increasingly clear that you do well by doing good? And if so, do you feel like you're being rewarded by investors for the work that you're doing? That was something Hans-Ole mentioned, that there isn't sufficient sense of that.
I think the short answer is I think we are being rewarded. I think we have to be careful to say the same things regardless of the audience we're speaking to. So, I mean, I think I could guess the views of a lot of people in this audience. But I
might
have
be
to,
surprised, actually.
But I have to be careful not to say what I think you want to hear. And so we're trying to be careful to say the same things to an investor community, a bunch of analysts on Wall Street, that we do in the academy or that we do in civil society. And it builds the trust, I think, that was at issue. And so I was just going to tell you something that I believe, which is that profitability creates sustainability. And that's, some people think that's grimy, but I don't. I think, when you get up in the morning, in the private sector, you get up in the morning and you worry about whether you're going to exist at the end of the day. And so sustainability is about your ability to create profit. So as we shift and we create partnerships with governments, I think there's a new sincerity. We can say what we think and the government can say what they think. And we don't get into these cartoonish sort of conversations about good and bad and evil and all that sort of stuff. We're just talking about specific programs. And we're seeing a lot of, can I give you a quick example?
Sure.
Just dealing with the government of Nigeria. They want to have an ID program. They want a digital ID program for about 150 million Nigerians. I think it's their adult population. So we've got a bunch of technology that makes that easy. It's chip-based. So we're in pilot now in Nigeria. We've got about 15 million ID cards. So it's the Nigerian ID card. And on the front, it looks like a North American driver's license with the face and a number and all the rest. But if you turn it over, it's a MasterCard. So is that grimy? I don't know. But it's double purpose because now the government can fund individuals electronically without paper, without cash, without all the security issues and all the rest. I don't know. And it's sustainable. We will make a profit from that ID program. So just as an example, I think the conversations are getting better. The business, the private sector, public sector conversations are getting far more genuine. That's my experience so far.
Hans-Ole?
Yeah, I also want to touch upon this because I think there are, again, a lot of different angles, and sometimes examples are good, as the one you mentioned. I mean, we can also talk about Tesla producing cars. I mean, in reality, they are trying really to push that agenda of having electrical cars, and that's even a listed company is being focused on quarterly reports, so they dare to do it. And they also dare to invest a lot in how to make sure that batteries are there and how they can, how can you upload them as good as possible and so on. So then we invest a lot there. So that's good to see that in the private sector something good is happening. But then it turns out that in some countries it's very difficult to sell the car because the tax, for example, in Denmark is 180%. That's, by the way, several of countries in Europe where you don't produce cars. Tax is extremely high. So what happened now there, when it came out, then there was a number of years you could have lower tax on Teslas in Denmark. But then it was running out. And then the politicians need to negotiate. Okay? What they realized that no, we cannot just support electric cars. So they increased the tax again. The Norwegians seem to be more wise. Now, I guess Tesla is one of the most sold cars in Norway, despite that part of Norway is pretty cold. So I think the point here with the public sector is also that the public sector are able to, are able to influence the behavior in the markets. And that is both, it can be good and it can be bad. I think this example are showing that it definitely is ending up being bad. But you can also have a discussion about what do you do with incentives, because the political system, the public sector are able to support an agenda. I mean, the most powerful we have in the world is something with tax. People always act when something has something to do with tax. If they have to pay tax or pay less tax, they act. So what's the problem here? Why are we not then having more? Coming from a part of the world where there is a lot of small countries, in reality, the problem is that if not all countries are doing the same, then, for example, to put an extra tax, for example, on high use of electricity, like some companies do because that's needed in their production, but definitely have a very high carbon footprint very often. So if you want to do that, in reality, you end up if only one country do it, and there is a lot of small countries that they have to pay the price because they will lose out in the competition. So my point is a little bit that I think there's also a need here at the political level to try to coordinate more. Because if you coordinate more, and I know you're going to United Nations, so perhaps that's a good place to start here. If you coordinate more, there are definitely tools in the taxation field which could push the agenda more. The problem is just you need to do it right, and you need to make sure that you do not create a situation where there is an unlevel playing field for too many participants. So I think that element need to be there going forward.
Lois, you've had experience in these kinds of negotiations in the political sphere as well as in the implications both in the private sector and in NGOs. What do you think about that, getting policymakers and politicians to coordinate, and also this thing about businesses, bringing a business head to NGOs?
Well, I think there's tremendous opportunity to look at the different strengths and the different ways of working across the sectors, and then in these partnerships, explore that to make it work. Your MasterCard example in Nigeria is a very interesting example of that. I've really been enjoying working in the NGO sector now and bringing some of that sense of the quarterly earnings from business, that sense that how you bring the external inside, the threat around climate change inside, so that rather than thinking about what kind of process feels comfortable or usual or traditional or right, how do we get pulled to something that's faster and stronger so that our solutions are as big as the problems we're trying to solve and that we're moving more at the speed of nature. At the same time, part of what I've enjoyed about working in government and the NGO sector is that when you don't have that pressure of waking up in the morning and wondering if you'll be there at the end of the day, it allows you to think in some of these broad terms and allows you to think about what kinds of impulses do you want to send out in the environment. I think we're at a time now where leadership and this trust building between sectors is really at the heart of things. And I was struck, Oswald, by your comments about Greece, and I also was struck by the results that came out about 2 weeks ago, the study that looked at, Angus Deaton and Ann Case's study that looked at the rising death rates of middle-income white Americans due to suicide and alcoholism and other factors. And you see in parts of this country, different kinds of upheaval of many, many different sorts that were quite, and that was quite a sharp study. So I think that for us as leaders in these sectors, it's to have a profound openness about what we have to learn from each other, and moving beyond what was prevalent times in the past was almost a Cold War binary view of the sectors. Business is always about just making money, and nonprofits can't quite get decisions, and all these kind of stereotypes and myths that were created. And really be able to focus on what do we bring to each other, and then from we bring that, how do we move much more quickly? And trust is essential to moving quickly. So, this is our moment, and I'm glad we're going to have the time and space to discuss it here today. But this is really our moment to be able to address some of these problems before we're so swept up in addressing the chaos that these problems have created.
This has been a fantastic way to set out our agenda. We've raised many of the issues we're going to be covering, not just over the next 2 days, but in all the projects that we're doing and that we seek to do. I'm obviously not going to attempt to summarize all of it. I hope you've been taking it in. There's a few things that I will pick out. I was struck by, especially by Lois, what you said about the role of increasing ambition and stretch goals for getting more urgency, and also having collaborations as a way to stretch you and to push things along. Hans-Ole, this morning, I'm going to take it away with me. I sort of knew it, but I didn't know it. This thing about the capital requirements and the implications for the disruptors and the small players who are going to be the big players in creating jobs. Walt, especially this message about making things sustainable by making them profitable. I love this quote that you said about not falling too much in love with ourselves as well. You have to be able to let go of that if you're going to do something different, but making things sustainable by making them profitable. It's slightly hard to choose the things that I'd like to pick out from you, President Calderon. But I think that very positive message that you just gave, you said just now we need to stop talking about hell and start talking about the benefits of the promised land. And in the green economy case, that is jobs. And you also said, I love this, I mean, you said several quotes about the fact that we don't need to choose between growing our economy and dealing with climate change. I could bring out any of those, but this is the one that really struck me. It is possible to make a difference, he said, if you can put together the private sector, the public sector, NGOs, all of us. That's what we're here for. Thank you very much to all of our panelists and to all of you, and we'll continue with lunch out in the foyer. Thank you.